focusing in on recovery efforts on Maui.
Today, we're talking to leaders in the nonprofit space, along with folks from the county. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha, and thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. We will be getting to our guests in just a few moments, but we always like to encourage our viewers who are watching both on air and online to engage with us in the conversation. You can add your questions and comments for our guests into the comment section of our Hawaii News Now Facebook page.
And we have a packed house today, 5 guests in total, starting with 2 right now from the Hawaii Community Foundation. Micah Kāne, who of course is the CEO there, and Keanu Lauhi, who is Senior Director of the Maui Recovery Effort for HCF. HCF, of course, a partner here with Spotlight Now, and we so appreciate their support. We appreciate both of you being here today. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So, Micah, I want to start with you. Maui Strong Fund, which a lot of our viewers I know contributed to, and a lot of us have been tracking. A lot of money raised after the fires in 2023. Tell us a little bit about the origin of that fund and the impact that it's had on the recovery so far.
Well, I think during at least my 10 years as CEO at the Hawaii Community Foundation can largely be defined by the 4 disasters that occurred in those 10 years. It started off with the Hana floods back in 2016, and we recognized that we could pool funds, we could create relationships. We had relationships with nonprofit organizations, and we could leverage that to respond to the community faster. And then the Kilauea volcano erupted, and the Kinoa administration approached us to, knowing what we did in Kauai, and the Puna Strong Fund actually, so the concept of the Strong Fund, was born there. And our capacity and our understanding of how to respond in a disaster, we matured a little bit. And then COVID hit, and we saw how we could kind of leverage our position even more. We started building practices, we started building proficiencies, ways to communicate, build confidence, and really leverage our grant-making strategy and our partnerships in community. And then when the Maui Strong Fund came, we had enough of a red button to push to kind of say we can help. And it really just took off. I think the first 30 days we had hoped that we could raise somewhere between 15 to 20 million, and it went over $100 million. And it went viral, to the tune of over 350,000 total donors, 75 countries, over 5,000 corporate contribution, over 400 corporate partnerships that occurred. And as a result of that, we found ourselves very, very involved in the recovery of Maui's disaster.
Wow.
Keanu, if you can kind of expand upon, the majority of the funding right now, you guys are in that recovery and stabilization period. How is that being applied through this grant-making process?
Yeah, you're right. Over half of our fund is allocated to this phase, in phase 3, the recovery and stabilization, understanding that the majority of our residents, as data continues to show, that the needs are in housing, our spaces in housing, providing stable housing for our community. To date, we've dedicated over $67 million to both interim housing, both projects and programs. And at the end, we look at doing almost 800 units, contributing both interim and permanent housing. In that space, we also see an extreme need for mental health services. And over the last year and a half, we've contributed over $7 million to mental health needs in our community, both in sort of non-traditional spaces like acupuncture, as well as very traditional spaces as providing direct service to survivors.
This is a question really to you both. When you're thinking about the needs in Maui in a situation like that, they're so vast. Housing takes time, right? Some of the other mental health issues that you're talking about, you can perhaps address in the immediate, right away. But Micah, let's start with you, and then I would love to hear your perspective. How do you prioritize need in this situation?
Well, housing was a crisis before the fires, and Maui had what we consider the crisis in the crisis. And Hawaii Community Foundation was spending quite a bit of time and resources in standing up what we call our House Maui initiative, which is really Maui right now, or at that time, 60% of the families on Maui was cost burdened by housing, meaning that more than 30% of their gross income was being spent on housing. When that happens, the math doesn't work out and they find themselves in a crisis. And so we were very aware of the challenges in that housing space, and as a result of it, it was a natural space for us to migrate. I think maybe Keanu can touch a little bit more on what we were doing there.
Yeah, so in partnership with the county through our House Maui initiative, we've been looking at regional infrastructure planning as well as understanding where, which projects are most ready for development. So through those deep partnerships with the county, we've been able to help facilitate alongside the county housing solutions coming to market. And it's really informed how we invest in our community with the Maui Strong Funds.
We're going to be talking to some of those county officials to get their take on how things happen a little bit later in our show. But I do want to also look at how this tragedy and everything that has happened has really led to some innovative solutions, different ways in which we are looking at housing, looking at mental health, and other different things that maybe have come up as a way to start to re-examine the way in which we are looking to rebuild this community. Micah, has there been anything that stood out of an innovative solution to some of these problems that could actually pay dividends down the line?
I think probably the area around water and fresh water, and the need to really understand how we can more efficiently utilize that resource, and to have a mentality of abundance versus scarcity. And I think what you're starting to see is a recognition of how we need to be much more innovative on how we recapture used water. And I think Keanu can talk about some of the infrastructure projects that we got funded. One was the launching of an initiative out of HCF called the Hawaii Island Enterprise Finance Center. HCF was certified as one of 29 organizations in the country to get a front row seat on applying for the billions of dollars of infrastructure bipartisan funding that was set aside back in 2022. We can share a little bit more about that, but it's been very successful in drawing down millions of dollars. We recently got approved a $60 million grant to basically create a R1 system, both distribution, source, and big, huge plus for the west side of Maui.
Yeah, and I think what you're hearing is a theme of partnership with the County of Maui to understand where some of those needs are and how we can be supportive of those needs.
Yeah, let me stick with you for a second. So, when we think about a disaster like this, we think of HCF, having been described in the past as a gap filler. And you kind of think of Salvation Army or the Red Cross, boots on the ground, getting people stable, getting people, so that they can navigate the next challenge. But what does that look like in practice, especially now that we are as far out of the disaster as we are now?
Yeah, I think it's that coordination between both what we can do with the limited dollars we have, and understanding where the county and federal government will provide support. And what we seek to do is work in concert and partnership with both our nonprofit partners who are operationalizing recovery strategies, and the County of Maui, who's looking at the holistic recovery of Lahaina. And so in that space, sometimes it's sharing of information and connecting resources together. Sometimes we're not the funder, but rather the connector. And occasionally we become that funder. But it's important to understand that with $1.6 billion of federal funding, in comparison to our $200 million of generous donor dollars, that we really need to leverage those federal dollars and put them to work in our community.
Yeah, Micah, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the big learning issue for me was those who are engaged are going to be held to the most complex situation that any family has. And every family has their own journey, they have their own complexity. But the irony is, in order to deal with that complexity, you have to do the blocking and tackling, the traditional stuff really well. That foundation has to be set so that you can pivot. And that's typically where we would come in, where we are tapping into our nonprofit partners who can do one-on-one type counseling, can do one-on-one type, crafting of plans to help them kind of navigate this very complex space that they're in.
As we talk about things that are happening in the positive light, there also have been a few roadblocks that continue to exist. Is there anything right now that you continue to see as something that you are looking to overcome, be it through policies or communication? What are some of the roadblocks that maybe are still existing out there that you're looking to hopefully resolve?
Well, I think we continue to struggle with assuring that we're we're leveraging every opportunity. And it's really around not just thinking in the short game, but thinking in the long game, and making sure that every resource that we're investing has a long play on it. And in this case, it's really around housing. We have to take advantage of the crisis for us to focus on the long game to make sure we're creating affordability for families on Maui. And that's an everyday challenge for us, because the forces to draw money away from that to other needs and are warranted. But right now, we think the focus needs to be on housing.
Yeah. Keanu, when you're working with folks on the ground, what are they telling you? What are their biggest frustrations right now?
I think it's the uncertainty of how they're going to financially recover from this disaster. And so, we've been working in partnership with our community partners as well as the county to look to fill some of those gaps. I think in addition to that, it's really understanding what is the future, what is their vision of recovery. And you're starting to see that now with, over 200 homes under construction. And so you're starting to see some of that activity pick up. But it is some uncertainty over how they're going to afford that rebuild process.
However, I mean, there's 900 community foundations around the country. And so we get a lot of good intel about what's happening with those community foundations that are dealing with disasters in their homes. And when you step back and you look at what Hawaii has done, I mean, I think the governor has done an outstanding job of corralling the resources to overcome the big issues. The mayor has done well as well. But there's three buckets that you're looking at. You're looking at the legal challenges that occurred. I think no one would believe that we're at the position where we're at today. These things take years and years to settle. We're in a very good position right now as a state. The second is the issue around cleanup, infrastructure, rehabilitation, those kinds of things. I think we're far in front of where people would think we would be today. And the third is around the people recovery. And that's where the complexity is. And so right now, I think by putting those two issues on the side, we can really focus on the people. And my colleagues across the country are not in that situation. They're dealing with those three factors simultaneously, which make it extremely difficult, where we just got to focus on one now, pretty much.
Yeah, I want to also just light the progress that has been made, because that seems to be a theme that we're hearing from many of the guests as we talk about Maui. Michael, for you, when you look at the progress that has been made, what stands out the most as a significant milestone that maybe you thought, I never thought we would be here at this moment? What has been some of those key accomplishments that you have seen?
I wouldn't have thought that 18 months out that we would be in a position where we're going to be focused on actually how do we get families to rebuild their homes. I didn't think we would be in a position where they would have the green light to get back on their property yet. The challenges were so monumental from an infrastructure rehab standpoint, the complexity, the emotions that were involved. I think that's something that we as a state should be very proud of. I mean, we have 100% of those lots that were affected have the green light to rebuild. That means they got roads, water, sewer back on and power back on. And I don't think we would have thought that we'd be there a year and a half ago.
Yeah, what do you think made the difference? What made that possible?
I honestly think it was a combination of the leadership at the federal, state, and county level. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism because we like to highlight the dysfunction of certain things, but when you step back and you really look at it, there was a lot of collaboration that occurred. There's still, and it's happening within the nonprofit community as well. I mean, we hijacked Keanu from the county to come and work with us because we wanted to leverage that intel. There was strength there. We needed that intel and that background in order for us to be better partners with them. That's why Keanu's here, and it took a lot to convince her to be here. We're very grateful that she's with us. We knew housing was going to be an issue. We knew that was a space that if we could build some capacity in our organization, we could better support the state and the county in their future efforts there. So I think, those are the things that I think we should stand up and be proud of and think about, while still, want to perfect the areas where we still need to address.
Yeah, and Keanu, I mean, what Mike is talking about too, especially when you're talking about the housing that you're building, this is not the gap filling in the way that we tend to think of it. I mean, this is a long-term impact for the county. What kind of an impact, when people think about Micah highlighted just how many people donated. When they think about where that money went, what would you like them to know?
I think that I'd like them to know that their dollars touched lives, individual lives, and makes a difference in individual recovery. And that goes to case management and navigation support, accessing, understanding their rights through the FEMA process, helping to navigate insurance claims, which can be extraordinarily challenging. But it also goes to trying to build a more resilient future. And so some of that goes to looking at how do we build systems within our nonprofit community that we want to be there for other disasters that may occur, and then strengthen those relationships within our community to make them more ready to respond in future disasters.
Right, Ryan, you asked the earlier question about where, innovative ideas came up, and I failed to answer one part of that I'd like to address. And where Hawaii modeled excellence was in bridging cultural issues with the federal government. The Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, you're going to speak with Kūhiō a little later, really led in creating a cultural training that is going to be modeled for FEMA around the country now. And they basically were the translators, the interpreters, the trainers in helping the FEMA team come in with some cultural sensitivity. And I think it'll be a really interesting area for you to explore a little bit later, but they really did an outstanding job, and something that they weren't traditionally doing in other disasters.
I do kind of want to touch upon that as we talk about, just the integration with the federal government. Obviously, there has been a change in administration. Things are shifting in terms of priorities, allocation of federal funds. We've spoken to other nonprofits as well on this program, and they're navigating through the changes that are happening as well. As the head of the Hawaii Community Foundation, how are you, watching what's happening in DC, and how does that apply to maybe some of the challenges that may exist currently on Maui?
I think there's two areas that we're going to be focused on. I mean, the first area is really around, how do we augment and support, those organizations that are providing services to very vulnerable communities that are needed more resources. And so we're definitely going to be playing in that space. I think we also need to look at efficiencies that need to be captured, within the nonprofit community, where consolidation can occur, where we're saving back office operations, but still being able to provide multiple types of services. I think what's also important as we reflect on these cuts is, and they fall in two buckets. One bucket is where the federal government is contracting nonprofits to do services that they're obligated to do. And those areas we're paying attention to. The other is areas where either we have a competitive advantage because we can model and explore and teach the world, and those areas tend to be in the environmental area for us, but it's also in areas where we're performing poorly. And as a result of that, we become very dependent on those federal funds. And those are the areas that HCF has been focused on, like housing, again, going back to housing again. And we got to do a better job there so we're not dependent on federal Section 8 dollars, for example, to house those that are most vulnerable.
We're almost out of time, but I want to take a moment to ask each of you. Most of us have not had an opportunity to walk in these neighborhoods. Obviously, both of you have. So I would love to hear from each of you what it is like now to walk on the ground in Lahaina, and what you hope that walk is like in a year from now. We'll start with you.
Recently being able to go back in, it's the sounds you hear, it's the hammers being swung, and it's the busyness of the rebuild that's really encouraging and hopeful. And I think that's the part that gives me hope, is that we're able to bring these families back home. And I think the vision of walking around is you can see a future being painted for Lahaina, and that's through collective partnerships. And it's really encouraging.
Okay, Micah, how about you?
I provide our board a weekly update on the progress that we're making, as a collective. Keanu provides me the number of permits that are actually being approved. And every time we see that number go up, we know that's another family that's going back into their home. And those are the things that we're celebrating right now, because you can hear their voices, as they go back, and it's just something we celebrate.
Yeah, and in a year from now, what do you hope those sounds are like? What kind of progress do you really hope to see?
Well, we have ambitions that, it's going to be a much more stronger, resilient community than prior to the fires. And I really think that we have that opportunity to do that, to really create a affordable, resilient community that's prepared for the next disaster.
Okay. And Keanu, one final question for you. What would your message be for people out there who maybe are still motivated to want to help, to give back? I mean, what are some of the areas where people can still find ways to support the Maui community?
think obviously you can support financially through the Maui Strong Fund, as well as other nonprofits doing great work on the ground.
Okay, thank you both for being here today. It's a very encouraging discussion. We really appreciate it. Joining us on the other side, we'll be talking to some officials from Maui County to get their perspective. You're watching Spotlight Now. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight Now as we continue on our conversation of the recovery efforts happening on Maui.
And we are joined now by two officials from Maui County, Josiah Nishita, Managing Director for Maui County, and John Smith, who is the Recovery Administrator for the county as well. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
I think, just that last question that I asked to Micah and Keanu and the image that they painted of those hammers being swung and the sounds that you hear as you walk through, so encouraging. So, John, let's get it from the county's perspective. How are we doing when it comes to recovering and rebuilding? And when we think about the number of permits and how fast that's going, what's your perspective on that?
Thanks for that question. I would say the mood in town is hopeful. When you drive through now compared to 18 months ago, it was gray, there was ash everywhere. Today, every single lot is cleaned up and there is construction everywhere. So in a word, it's hopeful.
Wonderful. And what about the actual breakdown in terms of, how many folks we are seeing back and how many folks we expect to see back?
Well, yeah, right now we are 400 permits in to the county right now. We set up an expedited permitting process to make sure that everybody that's ready to build can get through really quickly. We went ahead and restored all the water in the sewer, so every single lot in the whole town, in the whole impact zone, is able to be rebuilt right now. So I think everybody that can has moved forward, And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how do we reach the next group and help them rebuild.
And Josiah, as we talked about some of these partnerships and the importance of community partners like Hawaii Community Foundation, I imagine that there needs to be a pretty, coordinated effort where everyone's on the same page and just trying to manage all of this. How has the management of these types of relationships with nonprofits really helped this process to move along?
Yeah, well, we've had the benefit now of being able to help and assist other communities and see other communities through what they're going through. And just a matter of perspective that's provided to us really demonstrates how well the county, the state, our federal partners, as well as the private philanthropy and nonprofit organizations have been able to coordinate, communicate, collaborate in efforts to help people recover. And I think that's so crucial in everybody's recovery journey, is that all the partners are working together towards the same goal.
Yeah, let me stick with you for just a second. John was talking about that first tranche of people that are kind of already getting going. They have the resources. How are you working to get that next group on its feet? I'm guessing, the deferred payment loan program. How does that work? What is it? And how will that benefit the next group?
Yeah, so, one thing we really want to make sure is to not leave anybody behind in the process. We want an equitable recovery journey. We have some federal resources I'm sure that we'll cover a little bit later in our Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. And, there are individuals in our community that do not meet the qualifications or maybe thresholds established, and therefore eligibility for those federal programs. And so we want to make sure that we work with our private nonprofit partners, such as Hawaii Community Lending, Maui United Way, and Hawaii Community Foundation, to establish programs such as this to be able to fill the gaps for those who may not qualify for other sources otherwise.
Yeah, and maybe John, if you want to expand a little bit more on that.
Well, sure. I think what we really could focus in on from a recovery standpoint is just what Josiah mentioned on the CDBG-DR program. You're going to hear a lot about that over the next actually several years, but we're just now kicking that off. It's a HUD program. And what that is a $1.6 billion chunk of funding, block grant funding, that the county's managing to help with the long-term recovery. And $900 million of that is focused just on housing.
Wow. And so what does that actually look like? This is for either of you. I mean, Josiah, you can start, and John, you can fill in. What does that look like on the ground, the $900 million? Where does that money actually go?
Yeah, so, there's a whole host of programs, could include like first-time homeowner assistance. It could include like single-family reconstruction, multifamily reconstruction, as well as new builds that are going to be needed to help support all of our residents there.
And we say $900 million just for housing, but in fact we set aside about $400 million of that. So in addition to the $900 million, just for infrastructure, because we know that we can't continue to provide affordable housing without investing in the nuts and bolts of infrastructure, the roads, the water, the sewer.
Wow.
When we look and we continue to talk about just the importance the community plays, and we had this, we talked to just our two guests earlier from Hawaii Community Foundation about this. What are you hearing from the residents on the ground? What are the needs that they say they continue to feel that are not being met, or some of the areas where we can do a better job of maybe identifying some of these areas that still need to be addressed?
Well, one of the things that I think sets apart Maui County in relation to other communities that have experienced disasters that we've seen is really the overall amount of community engagement that we've been trying to have, to hear from our community directly and to be able to navigate and be nimble in accordance with the needs. And that's where our nonprofit organizations such as CNHA and Hawaii Community Foundation play such a huge role in helping us to be nimble. As we know, government is not always that flexible, and so working with our nonprofit partners really helps us out in that regard. And in terms of what we're hearing on the ground for needs now, it's in part why we're launching this program with Hawaii Community Lending with our other partners, is because gap assistance is needed to help fill in what's missing there for our residents in need right now.
Yeah, and who would qualify for something like this?
Oh.
Yeah, so it would be for individuals. Generally, they'll be over 80% of the area median income. They can go to hawaiicommunitylending.com/Maui Relief to find out more information. There's the Lahaina Homeowner Recovery Program available to them that they can find out different eligibility criteria and other information on that website. And, we're looking to launch that in late summer, as well as our other partners, Hawaii Community Foundation and Maui United Way. In the coming days, will be announcing their financial commitment to the partnership as well.
And I would just add, Josiah, that because we have such a close connection with the Community Foundation and folks like CNHA, and because we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening on the ground, we're able to leverage each other's funds. So as they look at the big CDBG-DR money, that's not for everyone, but we are able to look at, hey, where is that gap? So that's where this came from.
When we look at one of the issues that came up, one of that was what to do with the debris. If you can maybe speak to how things are going on that end, because that is obviously a big part of this cleanup effort, is that conversation of what are we doing with this debris and how is that being facilitated and managed properly. If you can share an update on the recovery efforts in that area.
Yeah, so debris removal operations have been completed to the temporary disposal site. We're nearing completion on construction of the permanent disposal site. And those operations are slated to begin somewhere around maybe June this year. We'll be transferring the debris from our temporary holding area in Olowalu back to Central Maui area at our landfill, so that we can make sure that we made a promise to the Olowalu community that the debris wouldn't stay there, and that we would return the area back for environmental concerns and cultural concerns and whatnot. So we're really appreciative for that community, stepping up and allowing us to really take that time so we could set up the the rest of the operations and community for success.
I think it's important to note that for those that haven't been tracking that, is one of the main reasons why is we actually didn't have landfill space because the debris was such a large amount. So while we place it temporarily in Olowalu, now we're moving it to the permanent disposal site that is sanctioned by DOH and EPA.
I'm curious, when Micah was talking about just how far things have come, and he really attributed that to synergy between, federal partners, state partners, nonprofit, the county, all of those folks working together. What do you attribute that to? And do you share that same sort of, optimism and encouragement from seeing things being where they are now 18 months out? The fact that we have, hammers going in and infrastructure completed, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true testament to the partnerships that have been established, even prior to the wildfire and just continuously built upon since. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but having the ability to kind of see other communities going through the same experience has really provided a matter of perspective where, we're just truly appreciative to, Governor Green, Lieutenant Governor Luke, our state legislature, our county council, our mayor, just for being able to help to navigate very complex situations, as well as even our federal delegation. I think, we don't highlight this enough, but our federal delegation, especially Senator Schatz, was truly instrumental in helping us to navigate the federal landscape as well as federal funding opportunities. And that in coordination with our nonprofit sector, Hawaii Community Foundation reached out to us less than 24 hours after the wildfires started to help starting to navigate this and provide assistance to our residents. And so without all of those interconnections and coordination, none of this really would have been possible.
Yeah, John, what are your thoughts?
It's truly remarkable the way that we've been able to coordinate together on this. Every time we need something that the county can't do, or that maybe that's not what we normally do, we have a partner coming in from the federal level, Senator Schatz in particular, all the way down to our counselors and our local partners. So we every time we have a need that the county can't fill, we have a partner, and it has been an amazing thing to be a part of that.
One of the things that we have seen through this process as well has just been the engagement with the community and them having a voice in what this rebuilding of Lahaina looks like. Moving forward, as you continue to have a lot of information, I imagine, that you need to get out to those who have been impacted, who are trying to rebuild. How much are you balancing their voice and some of the requests that they have, but also being practical with the needs of what it looks like to rebuild an infrastructure and rebuild this community?
Yeah, well, you know, we were so appropriately reminded fairly recently that our community will only move at the speed of trust. And a big part of that really is to keep showing up for them, to be accountable for the decisions that we make, to be transparent in the process, and to admit when we're wrong or when we've made a mistake. And I think, you know, what we've tried to do over time is to continue to show up for our community. We're still doing twice a month meetings with our Lahaina community. You know, I think over 60 to 70 community meetings at this point. Be there to share information, to answer the tough questions, even if we don't know the answer, to come back and find out and provide that, I think is all going towards continuing to establish and build upon that trust so our community can move forward as quickly and expeditiously as possible.
Yeah, the community meetings that we hold twice a month have just become a staple of the Lahaina community. In general, everyone knows when they are, and they come out to them, and we continue to show up, and we will continue to show up. Even when it's a hard conversation, we're there, and we want to continue to be there.
You know, we've talked a lot about the residential side. I'm curious about the commercial aspect of Lahaina. There's been a lot of conversation on just how close to the shoreline that should be built. When we think about what the expectation should be for what Lahaina town, not the houses necessarily, but the businesses, what that will look like, what are those conversations like right now?
Well, we're actively engaging with pretty much all of the commercial owners. I was just there meeting with them last week. We have meetings with my staff today. We're looking at how can we provide them more certainty in building. Mauka Front Street, it really is a clear path now. We're working on listening to their comments and balancing it with the needs of the community, the desires of the community, and looking at the environment and the nearshore environment to make sure that we protect it.
Overall, when we look at what the future looks like and this timeline and setting milestones, what would you say is the next significant milestone that you are looking towards as this, you know, anniversary comes upon 2 years in a few months?
Yeah, well, I think what I'm really hopeful for and really looking forward to, you know, I was able to participate in this affordable housing conference prior to the fire, and a story really resonated with me. They, you know, held a town hall, had people from the community come out, and they talked about the American dream and how if you put your mind to something, if you study hard, you work hard, that anything is possible. And an elderly woman got up in the back of the auditorium, raised her hand, and they called on her, and she said, "If I don't have a safe and secure place to lay my head at night, how do you expect me to dream?" And I think when we talk about all of the strong partnerships, you know, that you're seeing here today, and from partnerships that's not even reflected here right now with like state, federal, other private, you know, nonprofit organizations. All of that is really to help fill the gaps, to stabilize where our residents are at where they are in their individual recovery journeys, and then to help them dream again, to bring back Lahaina Town for all the great things that it was and improvements that need to be made so that they can continue to raise their kids, you know, for generations to come here.
Yeah, John, what milestones are you looking for?
Well, I mean, I definitely echo what Josiah is saying. We have to keep our eye on the ball of housing. I mean, it starts there, and if you can't have a place to sleep that's permanent, then what are we doing? So we're really gonna keep our eye on that ball. But I hopefully, while that's happening, we can also look very closely at the public spaces. If you look at our Maui Recovers website, we have a pretty comprehensive long-term recovery plan. We are engaging in that on all fronts. So we're looking to increase housing, make it so that everyone has a safe place to be, but at the same time, all these great ideas that are coming out in Lahaina Town, make sure that we provide a path forward and make that something that we can actually implement.
Yeah, let me stick with you on this housing theme and ask you a little bit about the timeline for new housing developments from the county perspective. When do you think people will actually be able to move into some of these units?
Well, some already have. Do you want to talk about?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we have 230 homes under construction. I think 17 have been completed. There's a number of homes that have been, you know, that weren't damaged by the fire, but were in the impact zone that have been rehabilitated and moved back into. We have a number of like multifamily projects. Kūhiō Kūhiō has already opened and is moving people in as we speak. And then the county funded a rebuild of Kūhiō Kūhiō, which is 89 multifamily units, kind of in that Lahaina Town area. and they're slated to potentially open around July of this year. And so there's a lot of movement happening, and the availability of the CDBG-DR funds will open up a new tranche of construction activity to get people back home.
Yeah, it sounds like that will really accelerate things.
Yeah, I think so. So like I said at the beginning, is these first homes that are already under permit and under construction, we see those being completed over this next year, which is awesome. We're really going to come in with this next round of funding to help those that can't.
One of the things that we had heard when speaking with our the partners at Hawaii Community Foundation, one of the areas that they brought up was mental health and making sure that residents feel that they have that support. I'm just wondering, in the conversations you're having with many in the community, where people stand in this, because they're still going through a very traumatic process. We've spoken with the superintendent here on this program, who expressed concern over learning conditions and supporting not only students but teachers as well. How much of that is important to the administration and the county to really provide that support for residents?
Oh, I mean, tremendously important. One of the, I guess, major points of feedback that we got through the CDBG-DR action plan process was regarding healthcare as well as mental health support. And I think, a lot of people tend to think of mental health support more in the traditional sense, in terms of, like a therapist or something like that. But what we've heard a lot from the community is just being able to get back together, like having events where they can see their neighbors, they can reconnect, they can spend time together, is really what's needed to be able to help people feel like home, feel like a community again. And so there's, all different avenues that we're gonna have to do. There's no silver bullet to solve, any one problem. It's really gonna take a continuity of effort between many different stakeholders, and that's why we really feel that partnerships are so important.
Yeah, our community meetings themselves are a form of helping with mental health. It's a stable environment. We bring in every resource that we have with all of our partners to every one of those meetings, and then we have our recovery center that's set up in Lahaina town that everyone can access every day, so that's fully staffed.
Yeah, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask each of you, for those of us who are not able to be there, what would you like people to know about what's happening in Lahaina right now?
Well, the sea life is returning, the beaches are restored. There was quite a bit of damage on the ocean itself, and through the debris effort, I think a lot of people would want to know that there's now sand in places that sand didn't exist really before because it wasn't accessible. So you can see that now. That's a really hopeful thing. There are trees growing everywhere. I'd love to talk about that effort at some point in time. We could probably bring all the arborists in and talk about all the things that are growing, all the agricultural things. There's just, there's so much to talk about, but hopeful is the word.
Wonderful. Yeah. Josiah.
Yeah, and I think, and our mayor says this all the time, if all we do is rebuild buildings, but we don't recognize the faces within them, then we've really failed our mission. And I think what sets Maui County apart in this recovery effort really is how we are defining success. So, when we've talked to other communities in the past, there's all these fancy metrics and statistics and everything that they use. And, Mayor Bisson really has given us one marching order, and that's to keep our community together and keep our community at home. And so each and every resident, what we really want to resonate with them is that the county is behind you. We want to keep our community together. And it's no offense to any other island or any other community, but Maui County truly is no ko'oi. And it's really due in testament to our greatest asset, which is our people. And that's what we're going to protect, and that's what we're going to fight for.
And I think that's a wonderful place to leave it. Thank you both for being here today, for making the trip from Maui to join us with an update. We really appreciate it. On the other side of the break, we're going to be talking to Kūhiō Lewis from the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. You're watching Spotlight Now.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahea.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahea for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive. First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app. Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, welcome back. We're continuing on in our conversation about the recovery efforts in Maui and the partners that are involved in the process working with the county.
Yeah, and one of the organizations that has been key on the ground from day one, of course, is the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. Joining us now is Kūhiō Lewis, the CEO of that organization. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start actually with something that Micah Kāne from the Hawaii Community Foundation referenced, which I thought was really interesting and was news to me, which is this idea of training FEMA and how other organizations or other disasters, other communities are going to benefit from the work that you've done with this organization. What can you tell us about that?
Well, when the federal government started coming to Maui, there was a divide between their understanding of recovery and how it could work in Hawaii. They didn't understand our culture, they didn't understand our people, our place. So we stepped up to offer trainings, cultural trainings, sensitivity trainings. And it wasn't just to FEMA, it was to the Army Corps, anybody that was working in Lahaina. We worked with local practitioners from Maui to help provide cultural sensitivity training. And it went really well. They vibed a lot better. They hired the right people, I would say. They've hired local organizations to help them. So that was I think the beginning. There was a lot of collaboration with Native Hawaiians. So to the federal government's credit, they really did lean on us to help navigate in the early days.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. You, of course, have been working closely with these communities from day one. What are you hearing now on the ground? We heard a lot of really great developments, but what are you hearing from people themselves about where they feel the recovery is at?
I think it's still challenging for many of the families there. They're still navigating. There's things that are occurring, like some of the subsidies that were available to families are starting to run out, or whether it's FEMA assistance or other subsidy programs. So they're trying to navigate their way to the next step, and it's not like a one box fit all. Everyone is unique in their situations, and so it really takes a qualitative approach to help these families. But recovery is definitely on its way. There's a lot of working people and organizations that are helping to get there. But what I see on Maui is a brighter future through collaboration.
What would you say is still some of the biggest obstacles, concerns that you're hearing from the community? What are some of the needs that are still pressing that people are, not complaining about, but just maybe vocalizing as an area of need that continues to exist within that community?
There's a couple that jump out at me. One is, I think, the path forward for Maui. There's some anxiety in terms of how community involvement in the future development of Maui, how that's going to play. So I think there's part of it. The other part is the economic development factor that has to go hand in hand in the recovery effort. So it's not just about building back homes, it's about having the economic infrastructure to support that growth. So I think those are the things that jump out at me, other than just finding the resources to support them and expedite their repopulation. It's not easy. It's complicated at times. So those are the things that jump out at me in terms of challenges.
Yeah, and we know that you've been doing amazing work in housing, but let's talk a little bit about workforce development first, since you brought that up. What kind of work is CNHA doing for workforce development in the county, and what do you hope that brings?
Yes, well, we were on the ground early in Maui's recovery, and one of the programs that we brought to Maui was the workforce training programs, our Hawaiian Trades Academy. And that program continues on Maui till now. Many of those that work in the recovery zone or even worked there prior got their certifications through CNHA's program. So that's HAZWOPER, HAZMAT, their OSHA certifications. Those are all qualifications that were needed or certifications needed to work there. So we continue to administer these programs. Also CDL drivers. We've graduated dozens of CDL drivers on Maui. So people are driving trucks now because we got them licensing. But things are going to evolve. Workforce development is going to evolve as the recovery advances. And we're committed to seeing how we can fit into that workforce area as things progress.
When you look at all of the needs that need to be addressed, we talked about housing, of course. You're talking about just the overall infrastructure, support, education. How do you begin to prioritize the needs? Because there still is so much that needs to be done. And there's obviously not one that's greater than the other, but at some point in time, there needs to be priorities. How do you gauge that?
Well, one of the good things about Maui County, Hawaii Community Foundation, is early on they invested in data collection. So we actually have a good pulse on where people are. CNHA has our recovery centers in 2 locations on Maui. So we're constantly collecting data. And so the data-driven outcomes that we're seeing is what drives a lot of the decision-making in how we support community. So that's how we prioritize things, is based on what we're getting from community, from high touches, through our resource centers and other areas.
And tell us a little bit about those housing programs that you are supporting and what you're starting to see.
Like I was saying, is it's not a one-stop for it's not a one-stop shop for everyone. It's sometimes you got to help them navigate the different resources. So, our organization, through the support of HCF, Hawaii Community Foundation, the county, we have houses that we've built on island. These are temporary houses to provide up to 5 years of stability, and so that's helping a pocket of people. We have subsidy programs where people are renting apartments, and CNHA is subsidizing that rent for them, so it's affordable. And simultaneous to that, our staff are helping to prepare them for the next phase of recovery. So it's just high touch. It's a high level of social. Investing in people, understanding their needs, using the data to drive our programs, and it's all collaborative with the county and the foundation.
As someone who was on the ground shortly after all of this happened and has been in touch and of course making multiple visits there, what has been your impression of just the last year and a half of how things have evolved? Any surprises, anything that stands out to you through this recovery effort and just how far we've come?
I learned something that, and actually Mayor shared this with me. I had a chance to spend a lot of time with Mayor over the last couple of years. And he told me, the people of Lahaina, they understand the winds, the rains, they understand their place like no other. And so I think even for me in working closely with the people of Maui, you see the spirit. The reason why they're there is because they own that place, because that is theirs, it's in their DNA. And so the resiliency of that community, I think, is what's gonna drive the future of it, and that's what inspires me. That's what I see as Maui's future. It's really the people of Maui, and they have to be very much a part of the decision making going forward.
Yeah, there was a lot of concern in the early days about people leaving the community, perhaps coming to this island or perhaps going to the continent. What are your concerns, especially when it comes to Native Hawaiians in Lahaina and in the surrounding affected communities, about that out-migration and trying to help those folks build a path back?
Many of them just didn't have a choice. There was no apartments available on island. The rents were skyrocketing, and as all the organizations tried to figure out how to support it, people were leaving. And there is an outward migration of folks. We hope they'll come back. Those that once things settle, there's a space for them. There's a place for them. It is concerning. Every day, some family is leaving our islands. Our population is being replaced by others from outside of Hawaii, and when that happens, you change the fabric of our place, of our people, and so it's concerning. And I think we can just all do the best we can to try and prevent that from happening, and then hopefully also get them to come back home.
You've had conversations with the federal delegation, with people at the federal level about just the need to continue to support this initiative as well as other Native Hawaiian initiatives. I'm wondering if you could just briefly share what some of those conversations were like as you continue to advocate for the support for not only Native Hawaiian populations, but for Hawaii as a whole.
Yeah, specific to Native Hawaiians, our organization our mission is primarily to support Native Hawaiians, but we see that as being inclusive, like putting Hawaiians in leadership roles so that they can help support all of Hawaii. That's really important to us. But that said, in terms of like the federal landscape, there's some progress being made. There's different departments that are coming out with letters that are not lumping Native Hawaiians in as being part of the DEI. And so that's important. So recently the Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, the Department of Interior have all said Native Hawaiians are not part of that category. And that was concerning to us at one point because we were just getting lumped in, and that could have meant a lot of our programs disappear. So it's a moving landscape. There's a lot of evolution going on. We're trying not to cause too much waves, but we are very observant and trying to see how we can do what we need to do to survive.
I want to ask you, before we let you go, similar to our other guest, what would you tell people who haven't had a chance to walk through Lahaina about what it's like, and what is your hope for this community going forward?
You know, Lahaina is a special place with special people. When you go there, it's not, you know, the people of Lahaina, you can tell that they love it there, that that's all they, some of them, that's all they know. And that's something that they would protect forever. And I honestly believe that if we focus in on that, the people of Maui, the people of Lahaina, whatever is built back will be really amazing and something that I think the world can learn from.
That's a beautiful place to leave it. Kūhiō Lewis, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this.
From the moment you wake up,
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live.
We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahea.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahea for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, we want to thank all of our guests who joined us here today as we continued on this conversation about Maui's recovery efforts. And you really hear the collaboration that's happening between nonprofits and the county and the significant progress that's being met. One theme that we have heard is just the overall success that they're really seeing through these partnerships and the acceleration in the recovery effort.
Yeah, I mean, again and again, the theme of not expecting to be this far along and recognizing that there is still so much work to be done, but a lot of hope here today, and we really loved hearing about that. Also thinking about how to leverage those federal dollars and make sure that that money goes to housing, which is what everyone seems to be focused on. And I loved that story, thinking about that if you don't have a place to lay your head, you can't dream, and so we know that that is true. So it was very interesting to get that update and hear about the different partnerships that are happening and all the hands that are making progress in Lahaina. Next week, right here on this program, we are going to be talking with the governor to get his take on the legislative session. And will we have a special session?
Yeah, a lot that happened obviously over the last few weeks and months with the end of the legislative session, and some of the victories for the governor, including the green fee, which is something that he's advocated for and pushed on. We'll also get an update about some key projects like Aloha Stadium. There's always a lot to discuss with the governor, and looking forward to that conversation. As always, we want to encourage you to engage in the conversation. Please, if you miss any portion of this, you can head back over to hawaiinewsnow.com to rewatch this interview or any of our prior shows and engage in the conversation by entering your question for our guests in the comment sections throughout our broadcast.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We'll also be asking the governor about his veto list. Interested to hear what might not make the cut. Beautiful day here in urban Honolulu. We wish you a great day. Aloha.